A convenience store near Kyoto, 1984. A security camera has been recording over the same tape for more than a year, and the picture is falling apart. Grain eating the edges of everything, colors bleeding into gray. On it, a man in a Yomiuri Giants baseball cap, glasses, tight permed hair, calmly setting something down on a candy shelf, in full view of the lens. He's not hiding his face. He doesn't think he needs to. Weeks later, that candy will test positive for cyanide, strong enough to kill in the doses hidden inside. Japan's national broadcaster will spend days sharpening this tape, pulling his outline out of the static frame by frame, and put it on every television set in the country, hoping one viewer somewhere recognizes the way he stands. 28,000 people will call the police with a name. More than 100 letters, mailed over the next year and a half, will mock them for every single one they got wrong. Over 130,000 officers will work this case at some point, one of the largest manhunts in Japanese history. Not one arrest will ever be made. Not one. 40 years later, the man in the cap has a name only he knows, and maybe not even that if he's already gone. This is the story of the monster with 21 faces, the gang that turned an entire country's candy aisle into a crime scene, and then simply walked away from it. Katsuhisa Izaki ran Izaki Glico, one of Japan's biggest confectionery companies, the maker of Pocky, a snack sold in nearly every home in the country. On the night of March 18, 1984, two armed men in masks forced their way into his mother's house next door, took a spare key from her by force, then broke into Izaki's own home a few steps away. His wife and 8-year-old daughter were tied up and locked inside the bathroom, left to listen through the door. Izaki himself was pulled straight out of his bath, given no time to dress, and driven to a small warehouse on the outskirts of Osaka. He was held there for 65 hours, with no idea whether his family was even alive. Then, on his own, with no rescue and no ransom paid, he got free and walked out. Police thought the worst of it was over. In hindsight, it hadn't even started. Weeks after Izaki escaped, cars were torched at Glico's headquarters in the middle of the night. No witnesses, no clues, just wreckage by morning. Then, on April 16th, workers found a plastic container of hydrochloric acid hidden inside a company building, strong enough to maim anyone who touched it or breathed too close. Nobody had even asked for money yet. It felt less like extortion and more like a warning shot from something that hadn't bothered to introduce itself. Then the letters started arriving, typed, mailed straight to newspaper offices, signed Kaijin Nijuichi Mensu, the monster with 21 faces. The name was lifted straight from a 1936 children's novel about a master thief called The Fiend with 20 Faces. This group gave itself one face more than the fiction ever had, and the tone in those letters was somehow worse than any direct threat. One read, "Dear dumb police officers, don't tell a lie. All crimes begin with a lie, as we say in Japan. Don't you know that?" Another, mailed not long after, "To the stupid police, are you idiots? If you were pros, you would catch us. Because you guys have such a high handicap, we're going to give you some hints." Over the life of the case, more than 100 of these letters would arrive, some addressed to specific detectives, some to specific reporters, by name. They weren't hiding from the police. They were performing for them, and for everyone reading the morning paper. The demand behind all of it, 1 billion yen and 100 kilograms of gold bullion, the largest ransom ever asked for in Japanese history. Police followed the group's instructions to the letter, riding trains back and forth between Osaka and Kyoto with the money in hand, watching every platform, every face and every window. On one of those trains, an investigator noticed a large man in sunglasses with short, tightly permed hair, watching him without blinking. "Eyes like a fox," he said afterward, and the name stuck. The man got off at Kyoto, jumped straight onto another train, and was gone before anyone could follow him through the crowd. He was never identified. A composite sketch of him, the fox-eyed man, would later run in newspapers across the country. One more unfamiliar face added to a case already full of them. Then, on June 26, 1984, one letter ended it without warning. "We forgive Glico." Around that same stretch of time, a separate letter turned strangely tender for a single line, claiming the group had a 4-year-old child among them who cried every day because he missed his Glico candy. No demand attached to it. No threat. Just an unexplained flash of humanity dropped into a hostage campaign, and then gone again. The group hadn't been beaten by the police. It had simply gotten bored and moved on to a bigger target. October 1984. A letter addressed to moms of the nation announced that poisoned candy was already sitting on store shelves, waiting to be bought. It wasn't a bluff. Real boxes of Morinaga candy turned up in stores across Osaka, Kyoto, Nagoya, and Tokyo, hand-labeled in block letters. "Danger contains poison. You'll die if you eat this. The monster with 21 faces." Lab tests confirmed lethal doses of potassium cyanide inside. Store clerks pulled products off shelves nationwide before a single customer could reach for them. Parents stopped letting their kids buy candy anywhere they didn't already trust completely. Over a dozen tainted packages were recovered before anyone took a bite. Between October 1984 and February 1985, the count climbed to 21 poisoned packages in total, spread across several of Japan's biggest snack brands, not just Morinaga, as if the group wanted the entire industry, not one company, to feel exposed. Morinaga's sales collapsed within weeks. Its stock price crashed alongside them. The company was forced to cut production by 90%, and it would take years to recover the ground it lost in that single autumn. And through all of it, nobody had actually died. Not one person was poisoned. That was never really the point of any of this. The fear did the work the poison never had to. That footage from the cold open, the man in the Yomiuri Giants cap, was recorded on October 7, 1984, inside a convenience store, appearing to set tainted candy on a shelf in full view of the camera, unbothered by it. Japan's national broadcaster spent a week enhancing the image before releasing it to the public on October 15th. It became, almost overnight, the most famous unidentified face in the country. 28,000 tips followed within days. So did constant comparisons to the Fox-Eyed Man sketch, printed side by side in the same newspapers. Nobody could say for certain whether the two men were even the same person. Over the life of the investigation, more than 100 letters were logged, and at various points more than 130,000 officers had touched some part of the case, one of the largest manhunts Japan had ever mounted. All of that manpower, all of that public attention, all of those phone calls, and the trail simply refused to end anywhere solid enough to make an arrest. By August 1985, the officer leading the investigation in Shiga Prefecture had spent almost a year and a half failing to close any real distance on the Fox-Eyed Man, watching a case grow larger than any single department could carry. On August 7th, the morning of his own retirement, the day he was meant to walk away from all of it quietly, he stepped into the yard of his official residence instead. By the time anyone reached him, the fire had already taken him, and there was nothing left behind to explain it. He never spoke about the case again, and never got the chance to. Whether the weight of failure did this to him, or something else entirely, is a question only he could have answered, and he took the answer with him. 5 days later, on August 12, 1985, one final letter reached the newsrooms. It didn't apologize for any of it. Instead, it mocked the tragedy in the very same breath it used to end the entire campaign. "Don't let bad guys like us get away with it. There are many more fools who want to copy us. No career Yamamoto died like a man. So we decide to give our condolence. We decided to forget about torturing food-making companies." And then, nothing. No more letters. No more poisoned candy on any shelf, anywhere. No more sightings. Not of the Fox-Eyed Man. Not of anyone matching the tape. Not once. Not ever again. The statute of limitations expired in pieces, like the case was being dismantled one charge at a time. On the original kidnapping in 1994, on the poisoning-related charges through 1999, and on the very last surviving charge, February 12, 2000. On that date, the file was formally closed, officially unsolved. Explanations have circulated for decades, and none of them have ever been confirmed. Some believe it was a small, careful crew of amateurs who simply knew exactly when to walk away clean, before their luck ran out. Some believe organized crime backed the entire operation from the very first letter. Some believe that Final Message was telling the truth for once, and that a single death really was enough to end 17 months of chaos that thousands of officers couldn't touch. None of it is proven. There is only what was documented, and what has only ever been guessed at. And a line between the two that nobody, in 40 years, has ever been able to cross. The man in the cap was on tape for a few seconds, over 4 decades ago, inside a store that probably isn't even standing anymore. If he's alive today, he's an old man now, carrying the best-kept secret in Japanese criminal history. And maybe, after all this time, not even sure himself what he became. This has been The Dark Stories. Sleep well.